Hi folks, the Filipino here. And November 11th is a special day in much of the West. In some places it's called Remembrance Day, and in the US, it's Veterans Day, a time to give thanks to those who served in the armed forces. Well, today, I want to honor your veterans by telling the story of an amazing battle that was crucial to the survival of the Philippines. And if it wasn't for the incredible bravery of those soldiers and sailors, I might never have been born. I originally posted this video 4 years ago, but people need to remember how the Philippines almost wasn't. I'm standing on the very spot where General Douglas MacArthur began the liberation of the Philippines. Welcome to MacArthur Landing Memorial Park.
On the morning of October 20th, 1944, American forces stormed several beaches here on Leyte. This is Red Beach, where the general delivered his famous quote, "I have returned."
With 200,000 troops from the 6th Army, the Americans were fulfilling their promise to begin eliminating the Japanese from the Philippines after several years of brutal occupation. The Battle of Leyte had begun. Opposing them were 85,000 Japanese who'd been on the island for years and had plenty of time to dig in and prepare defenses to slow the Americans down. Most people are at least vaguely aware of the course of the battle as MacArthur's forces spread inland, taking objectives and liberating towns along the way, assisted by Filipino forces who were more than eager to get a little payback by fighting alongside the Americans. But there were some lesser-known places that played a role in the Battle of Leyte, and those are the ones I'm always the most interested in. One of the landing zones used during the operation. At 10 o'clock on the morning of the invasion, the U.S. 1st Cavalry Division, supported by rocket fire from small support ships offshore, stormed this beach.
The 1st Cavalry had one of the most important objectives of the battle. They were given the task of securing the Tacloban aerodrome. Even though naval forces had softened enemy resistance by bombarding the beach, the troops found themselves facing some nasty fortifications.
This is one of the actual bunkers here on White Beach that was used to resist the American attacks. It's well-preserved condition and we can actually go inside. Come on!
Often carved from volcanic rock, these bunkers were nearly indestructible unless directly hit by a large shell or explosive. This particular bunker contained 8 Japanese soldiers on the day of the invasion, but there's no record of how they were killed. One common method was a hand grenade tossed through the firing slot. What a way to die.
But even once the Americans neutralized the coastal defenses from whatever beach they landed on, they still had to conquer the challenges posed by the terrain. This site is called Hill 120 on Blue Beach, where the American flag was raised for the first time after 2.5 years of Japanese occupation. Let's go to the top, shall we?
Hill 120 had also been used by local guerrillas to spy on Japanese troop movements to coordinate resistance efforts with the Americans. Filipino guerrillas constantly harassed the enemy and took out many Japanese soldiers. The Americans reported that Filipinos were fierce combatants, and when they ran out of ammunition, they would even hide on cliffs, dropping boulders on the heads of the enemy as they passed by. They numbered up to 30,000 towards the end of the war, and were sometimes organized into combat-ready forces that fought alongside the Americans. For the Battle of Leyte, a contingent of 3,000 Filipino guerrillas was under MacArthur's command. This is turning out to be quite a steep hill, and on a hot day like this, I can only imagine how the dead-eyes of 96th Infantry Division felt when they were battling their way up this monster. The Battle of Leyte claimed the lives of 514 dead-eyes, with another 1,500 brave souls wounded. I think I'm finally about to the top.
This is the memorial to the 96th Infantry Division who planted the flag on top of this hill. I salute your heroic efforts just by making it to the top of this darn hill. Whew. But beyond the battles and beaches, there are always the civilians to consider. I was fortunate enough to be able to find an actual Filipina survivor of the battle who remembers the events like they were yesterday and will probably never forget. Well, hello everyone. I have here Mommy Mila, and everyone calls her Mommy. Mommy, thank you so much for your time today and also for agreeing to be interviewed.
Thank you, Dean, for your unexpected visit.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. So, Mommy, can you share with my viewers your age? Pero ka na yan, how old are you, Mommy?
I'm already 85 years old. Mag-June 12 nga ni, I'm 86.
86. Okay. So currently, Mommy is 85 years old and she's turning 86 this
By
coming...
June 12.
June 12. Wow. June 12 is
malapit na.
our Independence
na.
Day.
Oh.
Well, advance happy birthday, Mommy. Well, you
Thank
don't
you.
look 85. I think you're 84 and a half. Just kidding. Okay. So, me, how old were you during the battle?
9 years old.
9 years old. So, during that time, Mommy, what were you doing? Were you guys hiding?
We were in the Huron.
Horon?
Nga, kuwan na baka.
You guys were hiding in the jungle?
Kuwan, we have a nipa hut there.
Okay, so you guys have a nipa hut in the jungle and you guys were hiding there.
Andi ng puno, ginbuhuan ni tatay. Di na kami ipanulod ko na ako ng idrohan hapon.
Okay, so Mommy was just telling me that in the jungle area where they live, there's this big tree and your dad dug a hole and you guys are hiding inside the hole because they were hiding from the Japanese soldiers. So Mommy, how many of you guys inside the hole?
Mga 5 lang kami dito sa Kubambuho.
Okay, so at that time there were 5 kids inside the hole because her mom and dad were like guarding outside the hole. So, me, what would happen if the Japanese have found you?
Kakastigo.
Takastigo yun.
Nakindudunggan. Repan mga hapon. Hingagapos.
They're tied and beaten and they're like maltreated. Kuan, yung papatay bagya pera.
Oo, may daging papatay.
Oh, okay. That was horrific. So Mommy said, aside from being maltreated or abused or beaten, some Filipinos were killed. So me, while inside the hole, can you guys hear the commotion going on outside, like the gunfire?
Kung kumanla itong bagan sa...
Nasa gitsit. She was demonstrating the actual experience she had. She said that when she saw the bomb passing by, it's like with a hissing sound, like and then boom.
Oo, dito ng bakwitan.
So Mommy said when they were at the rice field where they were hiding, they saw a bomb falling. So me, was there a lot of damage to your house and to your town during the battle?
Ang kuwan, nian atop na kuwan ng bungbong.
Boom, boom. Okay, so their house was damaged. The roof was gone and
The wall.
the wall. So Mommy said their house was damaged, no roof, no walls left. But the good thing about it was they weren't inside the house during that time. So me, what did you feel after the liberation and we finally won the battle? So what was the feeling?
We were happy kay we were already free to go where? School, balay.
So you guys were happy because we're
Very
free. We're free to go wherever and then
Balay pa ito kaya ginbuligan man kita na Amerikano.
okay. So Mommy said we were grateful because the Americans came back to combat the Japanese.
Ada? Anong dumala ka?
So Mommy's just reminiscing. Mommy, thank you so much for, the information. And I know it's kind of hard to reminisce, that part of your life. I know it's hard during that time and you're very brave to share your story with me and the viewers out there. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for the visit.
Of course, no problem. Thank you. So the Americans eventually succeeded in driving the Japanese out of the Philippines. But there's a pivotal battle that happened not on land, but just off the coast. If it hadn't ended the way it did, I might not be here talking to you. It's a story of such incredible bravery and tenacity that I'm compelled to share it with you. 5 days after American troops began landing on the beaches of Leyte, a naval battle was fought not far from here, off the coast of the neighboring island of Samar, that determined the fate of the men on shore. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was the largest naval battle in history, and the story I'm about to tell you is part of it. The story of a small group of outgunned vessels led by the unbelievable heroism of their captains and crews, whose guts and determination not only turned the tide of the battle, but perhaps saved the American forces in the Philippines from annihilation. This David and Goliath conflict should have been an easy lopsided victory for the Japanese, but because of unparalleled bravery by the Americans, it turned into a stunning defeat for the Imperial Navy, from which it never recovered. Shortly after MacArthur's forces landed here, a large American naval fleet led by Admiral Bull Halsey was supposed to protect the vulnerable beachheads from enemy counterattack. Halsey was tricked into chasing a Japanese decoy fleet far to the north, leaving the landing forces in Leyte protected only by a little group of support ships known as Taffy 3. Composed of a handful of slow smolt escort carriers, destroyers, and destroyer escorts, Taffy 3 was ill-prepared to fight a naval engagement, especially against the giant enemy fleet that was about to appear out of nowhere, right here off Leyte Gulf. Unknown to the Americans, Japanese Admiral Kurita had been assigned the task of pounding MacArthur's invasion force after Halsey's ships had been lured away. With a huge fleet of ships including the Yamato, the largest battleship ever made, Kurita had 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 12 destroyers, whose job it was to crush the American forces by sea, while Japanese ground forces counterattacked by land. The huge warship Yamato displaced more water than the entire fleet of Taffy 3 combined. As soon as the Japanese fleet was spotted, the commander of Taffy 3, Rear Admiral Sprague, ordered his small carriers to retreat in the opposite direction and told its destroyers to cover the escape by laying smoke screens across the water. After laying the smoke, Captain Ernest E. Evans of the destroyer USS Johnston, without waiting for further orders, did an unthinkable thing. Knowing that the little carriers of Taffy 3 could never escape in time, Captain Evans ordered his vessel to turn and single-handedly attack one of the largest fleets ever assembled. The mismatch was staggering. Here's a size comparison of the Johnston versus the Yamato alone, not to mention the 23 other ships. Even with a direct hit, the shells of the Johnston's puny 5-inch guns would literally bounce right off the hulls of the bigger ships. The only chance Captain Evans had to cause any real damage was with a few torpedoes he had on board, closing to within firing range while dodging 18-inch enemy shells coming from all directions. The Johnston fired its only torpedoes at a nearby cruiser, the Kumano, blowing the bow completely off the much larger ship. By this time, seeing the Johnston fearlessly engaging the enemy on a suicide run, Admiral Sprague ordered his other remaining destroyers and escorts to join the fight. So those ships also turned toward the enemy, while the carriers entered the relative safety of a nearby rain squall. The commander of the Japanese forces, Admiral Kurita, was becoming convinced that the attacking American ships couldn't possibly be little destroyers. They had to be at least cruisers, and probably part of a much bigger fleet. Unfortunately, the Johnston was suddenly hit by 6 shells from the huge Yamato, completely wrecking the bridge and crippling the engines and rear guns. But instead of abandoning ship, Captain Evans ordered his crew to make repairs on the engines so the ship could once again attack the enemy, even without torpedoes. Along with the Johnston, the other destroyers were being severely damaged by the enemy, but refused to yield. A few American planes had also joined the fight, but they weren't equipped for combat against warships and often only had useless machine guns and depth charges to harass the enemy with. The Johnston regained enough power to return to the fight, so Captain Evans again ordered the little ship to attack. Weaving between ship after enemy ship and damaging several along the way, the destroyers and escorts of Taffy 3 managed to throw the entire Japanese fleet into chaos. But Captain Evans' luck had finally run out. Surrounded by 4 enemy cruisers and several destroyers, the Johnston was pounded into a pile of wreckage, and the order was given to abandon ship. The remaining sailors dove overboard, along with Captain Evans, who was never seen again. The ferocious attacks by the sailors of Taffy 3 finally convinced Admiral Kurita that he was facing a much larger American force, and he actually gave the order for the entire Japanese fleet to retreat and head north. Despite losing 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, and a destroyer escort, the U.S. Navy pulled off one of the most unlikely victories in naval history, securing the forces on Leyte and the liberation of the Philippines through sheer bravery and a willingness to sacrifice their own lives in order to save the lives of others, both American and Filipino. This is a story that needs retelling for many reasons and must never be allowed to pass from memory. This selfless patriotism and bravery is what made your country great. So that's my take on the American invasion of 1944 that gave the Philippines its freedom from the Japanese. I thought it would be an appropriate video to celebrate your Memorial Day, and it gives me a chance, on behalf of my fellow Filipinos, to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts. You may have forgotten, but we remember.